And spread, gathers pleats and stuff. So let's look at which one first. Dart gathers, okay. When you want to add gathers into a garment. So if you look at this one, that first more basic handout, the very first one, dart gathers, that shows it all the way across, is basically what we've been doing with this last few when I talked about it. There is a dart here. They've moved notches outside of the dart. You cannot put the notches on the dart and gather that to nothing, because this needs to sew into a waist, right? It needs to sew into something else, or it needs to fit. If you, the one that says slash and spread gathers, there's a stack over there. You can find it. So, again, just as a reminder and for a note for yourself, the mistake I see all the time with people that are newer to this is they take the dart, they take those notches, and then they gather that. But the dart turns into nothing when you sew it from the outside. It all went in. The gathers, you can't squish them to nothing. They need space to be there. So in order to get that, you must notch outside of the dart area to dart that in, to gather it in. Does that make sense to you? So you need to know what the measurement is originally. So I would be measuring from the outside of each dart, here to here. Say this was 10 and this is 10 for a total of 20. No matter what, in the end when you gather it, it must come back to 20. It always has to come back to the end measurement, right? When you're measuring, let's talk about measuring. So when I'm measuring a pattern, I'm not measuring it like this on a curve. It's not accurate, all right? So I'm going to hold my measuring tape upright, and I'm going to measure to the outside of the dart. I've got that measurement. I'm going to go over here to the outside of the dart. I've got my measurement. That is the total in the end that it must fit back to, all right? Because that is the measurement that was already on the pattern for the body. And maybe this is sewing into a waistband, maybe it's sewing into a peplum, whatever it is, a dress, whatever, right? So do you understand that about the darts having to be outside, or the notches having to be wider for the gathers? Because gathers, you can't slam that fabric into nowhere. Because if you try, it's going to be bigger, your garment's going to fit bigger there.
So is it essentially like saying, instead of sewing the dart and eliminating all that fabric and being left with 10 and 10, you're just redistributing that fabric evenly across that same space?
A bigger space. Because
well, not the space of the dart. I mean across that same 10 centimeters that your finished garment would have been.
Yeah, you redistribute all the way. Like it could even go from here to here and be gathered, right?
Right.
Which is kind of what they did on the second one.
Yeah, okay.
The key to remember, though, if you start doing this, to shorten your trial and error period is to remember what percentage gather is. So if I measure this space in here, from here to here, the amount of the dart, and I times it by 75%, and then I take that measurement and I put half on either side of the dart, you're going to get a 75% gather, which in a case like this is a nice amount. 100% might be too much. It might be too puffy there. I always tell my students to start at 75. It's a nice amount that it looks gathered. It's not crazy. It's not going to make it too puffy, right? So I would probably start at the 75. Does everyone understand the percentage? Why?
No.
Okay. So the dart is the amount that needs to gather away, right? We have to get rid of that because that amount has to go away. So you measure that distance of that dart. Say it was 10 centimeters. If I want the gathers to look a particular way, 75% of 10 is 7.5, right? So I take that 7.5, I take half of 7.5 and I put it on this side of the dart. I take half of 7.5 and put it on this side of the dart. When I gather it down to equal 20 centimeters here, I will have a 75% gather. All right?
You take 70, I'm just doing my math. Okay,
Yep.
so you've got 7.5 centimeters. Okay, divided by 2.
3.25. No, 3.75.
Okay, so 3.75, and then so there's 3.75 centimeters between the dart and the notch.
No, that's where you put a new notch. If you wanted to calculate your percentage, I'm telling you how to find the notch.
Right, so instead of evenly distributing it from notch to notch, you're creating new notches, distributing
These,
it to
ignore
there.
these. You made these notches.
Yeah.
Didn't exist before.
They didn't exist. It was a shirt with a dart. These, I'm
okay.
telling you how to get the notches.
Oh, sorry.
Right?
I'm imagining that these notches tie into a skirt and they're preset.
No, no,
Okay, I
no.
understand
These
that.
notches are for the gathers.
Okay.
But if you want to calculate exactly, you can wing it and try that.
Okay.
Because sometimes it's a little easier when you're starting. But I really want you to understand that to save yourself time in the end, if you can calculate the percentage that you're putting in, you will get the look specifically that you want. And maybe at one point, like I said, you might want to do a chart and do a little sample, big enough, and do a 75% gather, do a 100% gather, do a 200% gather. When you're getting 200, you're talking a skirt, most likely, right?
Okay, so from here to here
Yes.
is
Yes.
3.75.
Yes.
And then is there going to be another 3.75?
No.
That's it.
No,
That's
because
my
because you've
gathers
got
in there.
3.75 on either side,
Yeah.
and then you're going to gather that down to make sure that this end result equals 20.
From
Where's the
M10.
20
Okay.
from? And where's the
I
10
made it
from?
up. The 20 is the finished measurement of the bottom of the
Yeah, okay,
waist.
And is the 10 when you measured the dart?
No, I just made it up. Look, so if you look here, all right, on this guy, I pretended that this was 10 centimeters. I pretended that this was also 10 centimeters because it's easy for me to explain. And I can calculate the percentage really easily. That's why the dart is 10 centimeters, all right? I'm just making these numbers up. You need to measure the garment. Don't ever include the inside of the dart because it doesn't exist when you're wearing the garment. What you need to measure is what you see on the outside.
So then when you...
So I measured 10 and 10.
Yeah.
They equal 20, right? I know no matter what I do to this, I must bring it back to 20. I don't care if I cut in here, if whatever I do, in the end, I need to sew it back down to 20. However I want, pleating, gathering, darting, whatever, the end finish measurement must be 20. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I thought that this was 10. That's not 10.
That's what I thought.
Okay, so
That's
back
right.
again.
10.
Let me start out here with the dart. I did say 10. I made it up. 10 centimeters for the dart. I made it up 10 centimeters because it's easy for me to divide to make 75%. It is not real, but this is just so I'm throwing numbers out there. So I'm pretending my dart is 10 centimeters.
But so in this scenario, this to
Is-
this is 10.
Here to here at the bottom, not
Okay.
up at the top.
Okay, well, this is 10 though,
Yes,
in this scenario.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
then
Yep.
I do it.
Yeah. So this amount, that 10, is what we want to calculate another 75% more because that is the area you're gathering, right? So if you want to give it the look of a 75% gather, you need to take 75% of this measurement, put half on either side, create your notch, gather that down. When you gather this, in the end, the whole thing must equal 20 centimeters because that's what the original was.
So now you've got your notches. Okay, we've got full 30 centimeters of material. Are you gathering only between the notches?
Yes.
To 10.
Yes. Yes. Not to 10, though. 10 is the wrong thing. Not 10.
Gathering to the whole thing's 20.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, because if you gather that to 10, it's just random, right? So now you don't have to calculate the percentage, but I need you to understand that because in the end, it makes it a little harder to understand right now. So if the percentage is really bothering you, then ignore it. Just make some notches and play. Make sure you give the dart enough room to gather, all right? Because the percentage is a little bit trickier to think, and I don't want to spend all this time talking about it because sometimes you just have to do this for a while. It will eventually click in, and you know you can wing it, you can guess and try to put it, right? But I'm just telling you how to calculate it so that it works. But sometimes calculation is throwing another wrench into it that you may not want to deal with at this point.
This is the same way we did it earlier this morning,
Yes.
right? Because what you could do is you could say the
Yeah.
notches. There's
This is
like,
exactly what we did
There's
earlier.
like, what, 6.5 on each side now, right? So
Yeah.
there's 13, so you would gather to 7.
Sure.
So that it's
Yeah.
still
Yep.
adds up to 20.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Okay. So with the percentages, that is not my main concern that you understand the percentage, okay? And if it is too much, then shut it out. Write it down. Eventually, when you look at it again someday, it will make more sense to you, right? If it doesn't, because it's not the main point of this. The main point is that you understand that the gathers need room. You can't gather that dart down to nothing. So you need to go outside of it a little bit to get some gather in there, okay? If we look at the second picture and we look at the end, this has more gathers. So they already did step 1, right? So this has a little bit of gather, right? But now we want gather all the way around. So now we're going to slash and spread in here to add more gather. So you literally draw 2 lines. They must go to a pivot point or a seam. So pivot point, like when we did the darts. So in dart manipulation, you went to a pivot point, right? In this case, we are slashing up to the armhole and we're spreading it open to add an amount of gather. And then we gather it all back down to 20, because it's always 20 in this scenario, right? And we're getting gathers here. That's a little bit of gather because we only added a little bit in. Is everyone with me so far? So we did this part, plus we added more to get more fullness all the way around. All right?
Okay.
Hang on, I'm going to keep going for a sec.
Sure.
Just sometimes I want to be careful because if we stop too many times, it actually makes it more confusing sometimes, right? So I'll keep going and then we'll stop and we'll cover a bunch of questions. Okay? The bottom one is a lot more gathered, right? So on the bottom one, this original manipulation was done, right, to get rid of the dart. So we know that's gathered. But now we want it a lot bigger. So I'm going to slash in to it more spaces and spread it open. When you slash and spread, not always, but for the most part, even distribution of amount that you're adding in is always the safest bet. If you're new to it, stick with even, right? Because uneven distribution can cause lumps in areas, right? So when you draw the 3 lines on this, so where did those half scales go? Do you see, anyone see where they went? Did they, oh yeah, thank you. Do you have a front there, is there? I don't want, oh yeah, I'll take this front. Here, I'll give you the back
Is
back.
that the back?
Yep. So this is a front. I got one. Thank you. I got it. So let's ignore the bottom of this again because that's getting into more. All right. So if I were doing this one, I would transfer this dart to the bottom first. Right. I would do this little bit that they did at the top. Right. That little gather, the step 1. And then now I want way more fullness in here. Maybe you're not gathering it. Maybe this is a cape, little capelet. Maybe it's a very loose shirt. Maybe you're going to pleat the bottom. Maybe you're going to, right, you're probably not going to dart it, you need to be more directed, right? So this could be pleated or gathered down, right? So then I would evenly choose my placement, and I'm just doing this rough because I haven't transferred this. We're pretending I've transferred that, right? I'm going to make even spacing of my slash lines. I'm going to cut them. They have to cut to a seam. We're pretending this dart isn't here, right? They need to go to that seam. I'm going to cut them to the seam, to, not through. Same thing as the darts. I'm pivoting. I'm going to spread them open, however much I want. Again, if I calculate the percentage bigger that I'm making it, I will know how big I'm making it. Or you can wing it and see what happens, right? Either way. But that's giving you then a more fullness, right? So this is just general theory of fullness. They're showing you a little bit directed in a space, a little more, a lot more, right? question.